Hello guys and welcome. In today's tutorial we'll be discussing Angular component selector by attributes, which is the continuation of our last discussion on Angular selectors. So without wasting much of our time, let's dive right into coding. So just like we did in our last discussion, while talking about Angular selector by type. So the first thing we are going to do is to create a component that we are going to use to demo how to create and use Angular selector by attributes. Okay, all this spacing up today, so let's quickly do that. Ng generate components. Let's call it attributes or selector by attributes. Click enter. So now we have our components. So the components is cell by attributes. So let's open the template file of the components. So let's close this one. So today we are going to make it a bit more presentable, like more than we did in the previous one while explaining selector by type. So quickly we are going to style this one a bit. Let's call it box. We have an HTML, then in between these, let's say h4 selector by attributes. So here to specify to use a selector by attributes, so we are going to enclose whatever name we are giving to that selector inside a square bracket, and inside this square bracket we're going to specify the name that will be used whenever we decide to use, or whenever in our app where we want to use this component. So in this case I will make it very simple. Let's say cell array. Okay, let's make it cell array. So this is the attribute name and is currently enclosed inside the square bracket. So do a quick demo. So let's import our components and use. We are still coming back to make it more fancy, but let's demo and see it live in our web page. So just like we did with others, let's import the components cell by array. So this is the components imported. So the next thing is to use the components. So now to use selector by attributes, so to use selector by type, we are using something like this, the one we demo in our last discussion, which is it looks like tag. But to use selector by attributes, so what we are going to do is to specify the attribute of that component in a particular host element. So the host element is any element that we attach our component to. So let's say I have a div. Okay, so this is a div. Then in this div, so let's specify that we want to use our attribute on these elements. So the name of the attribute is cell array. So let's check this. If it is working, then I'll come back to explain more on this. Of course, we have cell by attribute. So you might be wondering, how is this working? So behind the scene, what Angular does is to replace the host element with the content of the component we attach to it. So in this case, the div will be replaced by the component we have as cell by attributes, which is this component. It is that simple and it is that fancy. So which is small for simpler cases, attribute for components without much manipulation. So this can be a quick and fancy way to use them. So this is how we create and use selector by attributes. So that's not the end. Let's make it more fancy today. So we have a box inside the style class. So let's style our components. Let's give it the width. Let's say 400 pixel, the height of 400 pixel also. Let's say border, so solid. Let's say something like aqua, like this. Border radius, the flex, display flex align. So all I'm doing is to make it more fancy. Then we have, what do we have here also? Okay, I think that should be it. So let's see how that turns out. As you can see, we have our components. It looks more attractive than the previous one. So of course we can give it more. Let's make it background. Okay, let me use this. Yeah, voila. So we have our components functioning and looking fancy. So this is how to create and use selector by attributes in Angular. Of course, you can also customize further with something like this. So we have this attribute which is applicable, which can be used with virtually almost with virtually any HTML element actually, but we can customize it further to specify, to attach the kind of element that it can be used with. For example, I can say I'm saying let's say button. So button. Okay, I think button won't look good on this one. So okay, div, and so let's come back here. I will specifying that for div, let's say a section. So now let's say cell by attribute, cell attribute. So let's check our browser. As you can see, it is not reflecting. Why? It's not reflecting because in the specification of our attributes, we specify that the attributes can only be used on div element. The fact that we append or prepend div before the square bracket, so we are limiting this component to only div element, and you can make it more further by attaching nodes, so this is how this is working in Angular, and that is all in this tutorial. If you have any more further question, don't forget to drop it and I should be able to guide you further. Thank you. See you in the next tutorial where I'll be discussing Angular selector by class and how to combine the three: selector by type, selector by attribute, and selector by class.